I've always believed in keeping my home neat, organized, and respectable. My little slice of the neighborhood wasn't much, just a modest house with a decent-sized yard, but I took pride in it. Every weekend, I mowed the lawn, swept the driveway, and trimmed the hedges. I wasn't trying to win Yard of the Month or anything, but I liked things clean. And of course, part of keeping a house tidy means dealing with the least glamorous chore of them all, the trash. Every Thursday night, I'd roll my large black garbage can down to the curb. Nothing special about it. Just your average plastic bin the city provided. It was sturdy, clean enough, and perfectly functional, at least until my neighbor, the one I and the rest of the block quietly referred to as Karen, decided it was her mission in life to destroy it. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not someone who throws the Karen label around lightly. But this woman, she had earned it. She was on the HOA board, and she wielded that power like a medieval queen swinging around a sword. Her rules weren't just guidelines, no, they were commandments, and she expected absolute obedience. But what made her truly unbearable was the way she inserted herself into everyone else's business. Too many garden gnomes on your lawn. Karen would file a complaint. Fence paint looking a little faded. Expect a notice in your mailbox by morning. Forget to bring your trash can in within 12 hours of pickup. Oh, you could count on a fine. And yet, despite her obsession with everyone else's trash bins, she seemed to have an issue with mine in particular. It started small. A few months back, I noticed my trash can was dented. At first, I thought maybe the garbage truck had clipped it. But then I looked closer. The dents weren't from the truck's mechanical arm, they were low, wide scrapes, like something had rammed into the bin. The next week, it happened again. This time, there was no mistaking it. My trash can had fresh tire marks across its side. That's when I started paying closer attention. Sure enough, every Thursday morning, right before the garbage truck rolled through, I'd hear the familiar hum of Karen's silver SUV pulling out of her driveway. And every Thursday, like clockwork, I'd catch her swinging her steering wheel just enough to clip the edge of my can. She wasn't doing it by accident. Oh no. This was deliberate. At first, I tried to be civil about it. One Saturday morning, I strolled over while she was fussing with her flower beds. "Hey, Karen," I said with as polite a smile as I could manage. "I think you might have bumped into my trash can the other day. No big deal, but I'd appreciate it if you kept an eye out." She looked up at me, narrowed her eyes, and gave me the kind of smirk that could curdle milk. "Oh, that old thing," she said, brushing dirt off her gloves. "Maybe if you didn't leave it sticking out so far, people wouldn't hit it. These streets are narrow, you know. It's a safety hazard." I blinked. My trash can wasn't sticking out. It was right where it was supposed to be, tucked neatly by the curb like every other neighbor's bin. Still, I kept my cool. "It's in line with everyone else's," I said evenly. "The garbage guys haven't had any trouble with it." Karen sniffed. "Well, maybe you should be more careful. Not everyone drives a compact car, you know." She gave her SUV a proud pat, like she was showing off a prized stallion. I let it slide, at first. But the following week, when I wheeled out my trash can, I decided to test a theory. I set up my lawn chair by the window early Thursday morning, sipping coffee while waiting for her to leave. Sure enough, right at 7:15 a.m., her SUV roared to life. She backed out, paused, and then, thunk, there went my trash can, tipping sideways into the gutter. I shot up, stormed outside, and shouted, "Karen! What the hell?" She slammed on the brakes, rolled down her window just a crack, and gave me that smug smile again. "Maybe if you weren't so careless, this wouldn't happen," she said, then drove off like she'd just won some kind of battle. That was the moment I realized this wasn't an accident. It wasn't carelessness. This was personal. And from that day forward, the trash can wars began. Every week, without fail, she'd clip, crush, or outright topple my bin. Sometimes she'd act like she didn't notice. Other times, she'd give me a little wave from her window, like it was some kind of inside joke between us. Neighbors noticed too, but no one wanted to get involved. Most just shook their heads and whispered, "That's just Karen." But I was done being her target. Done being the guy who had to drag his battered bin back up the driveway every week like some defeated soldier hauling a wounded comrade. No, if Karen wanted a war, then a war she would get. And I already had the perfect idea for how to fight back. After weeks of enduring the same nonsense, I couldn't help but replay the situation over and over in my head. Most people would have shrugged it off, bought a new trash can, or maybe reported her to the HOA. But the irony was, she was the HOA. Or at least, she was the loudest, most bossy member, and the rest of the board always seemed too spineless to oppose her. Reporting her would have been useless. Complaining would have only fueled her fire. Karen loved nothing more than proving she had power over the rest of us. No, I needed something different, something clever. Something that would end this game of hers once and for all. The first thought that came to mind was installing a camera. That way I could capture her little demolition derbies on video. But then I thought it through, even if I had the footage, who was I going to show it to? The police? They'd laugh me out of the station. The city? They'd say it was a civil matter. The HOA? Well, that was like asking a wolf to guard the sheep. So instead, I started thinking less about proving what she was doing, and more about stopping it. That's when inspiration struck one Saturday, while I was at the hardware store. I'd gone in to grab some lumber for a side project, when I passed the concrete aisle. I froze. There they were, giant 50-pound bags of concrete, stacked on pallets like soldiers ready for battle. And that's when the idea hit me like a lightning bolt. What if my trash can wasn't a flimsy piece of hollow plastic anymore? What if, instead, it was a solid block of immovable stone dressed up to look like an ordinary garbage bin? I pictured it in my mind. Karen's smug SUV pulling out of her driveway, swerving just a little to take a swipe at my can, and then, instead of the satisfying thunk she'd gotten used to, her car would slam into an unyielding concrete monster. I actually laughed out loud in the aisle, earning a confused look from an old man pushing a cart of garden soil. The more I thought about it, the more brilliant it seemed. Not only would it stop her from destroying my can, but it would also send a clear message. I wasn't playing her game anymore. Of course, it wasn't going to be easy. I couldn't just pour a slab of concrete and slap a lid on it. No, this had to be convincing. It had to look exactly like a normal trash can, so she wouldn't suspect a thing until it was too late. So, I got to work. The following weekend, I cleared out a space in my garage and began my little project. I picked up an extra garbage can from the city, a cheap one that was identical to the one I already had. That way, when the time came, I could switch them out seamlessly. Next, I bought several bags of concrete, a large bucket for mixing, and a few tools to help me shape everything. For the next few nights after work, I labored in secrecy. First, I reinforced the bottom of the spare trash can so it wouldn't split open when I poured the concrete in. Then, slowly and carefully, I began filling it. Bag by bag, the can grew heavier. My arms ached from stirring, my clothes were coated in grey dust, and my garage smelled like wet cement. But each time I stepped back to look at it, I felt a surge of satisfaction. By the third night, the can was nearly half solid. I left the top portion hollow so I could sprinkle a few empty boxes and bags inside later, just enough to make it look like it was filled with normal trash. It was perfect. When it was finished, I rolled it forward on its wheels. It looked completely normal. No one would ever guess that it weighed several hundred pounds and could probably stop a tank. I gave it a test push down the driveway, grunting with effort as it barely budged. This thing wasn't going anywhere unless someone had a forklift. I smiled. All that was left now was to wait for Thursday morning. The night before garbage day, I executed my little switch. Under the cover of darkness, I wheeled my decoy can out to the curb, making sure it sat exactly where I usually left it. Then, for good measure, I tossed a few old Amazon boxes, a bag of grass clippings, and some crumpled newspapers on top. From the outside, it was indistinguishable from the real thing. I went back inside, heart racing with anticipation. This was it. Weeks of annoyance, humiliation, and smug smirks were about to come to an end. And the best part? I wouldn't even need to lift a finger. Karen's own habits were about to do all the work for me. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but grin. For once, I was actually looking forward to garbage day. Thursday morning arrived crisp and bright. I woke up earlier than usual, brewed myself a strong cup of coffee, and stationed myself at the front window like a soldier on watch. At exactly 7:15, right on schedule, I heard it, the rumble of Karen's SUV engine coming to life. I leaned forward, pulse quickening. This was it, the moment of truth. The morning sunlight cut across the street in long, golden streaks as I sat by the window, coffee in hand, staring intently at the curb. The world was quiet except for the occasional bird chirping and the distant growl of a lawn mower a few streets over. But I wasn't watching the birds. I wasn't enjoying the sunrise. I was waiting for her. And right on schedule, like a bad sitcom rerun, Karen's garage door creaked open, and her shiny silver SUV rolled into view. She sat there for a moment, fiddling with something on her dashboard. Maybe setting her GPS, maybe adjusting the radio, it didn't matter. Because the second she shifted into drive, my heart rate doubled. "Come on," I whispered under my breath, eyes locked on the trap sitting at the curb. She eased forward, then made her usual wide arc into the street. It was a move I'd seen her pull countless times before. To anyone else, it would have looked like careless driving. But I knew better. Her wheel nudged just a little too far to the right. And then, bam! The sound echoed down the street, sharp and metallic, followed by the unmistakable crunch of plastic shattering. Except it wasn't my plastic can this time. It was the front corner of her beloved SUV. The car jolted hard, lurching sideways as her tire rolled halfway up the edge of the unmovable trash can. Karen slammed the brakes, her eyes wide with shock. From where I sat, I could see her mouth moving, angry words, no doubt, but the windows were up, so I couldn't hear them. I nearly spit out my coffee trying not to laugh. The concrete can hadn't even budged. It sat there like a stubborn sentry, upright and proud, not a single scratch on its surface. Karen, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. She threw her door open and climbed out, inspecting the damage. Even from a distance, I could see the long white scrape across her bumper, the cracked headlight, and the dent along the fender. Her face twisted in fury. "What the hell?" she shouted, kicking the can with her shoe. The impact hurt her more than it did the trash can. She immediately winced and hopped back on one foot. I couldn't contain it anymore. I burst out laughing, so loud I had to duck behind the curtains to keep from being seen. It was everything I had hoped for. A few neighbors had heard the commotion and were starting to poke their heads out of their doors. Old Mr. Jenkins across the street shuffled onto his porch, leaning on his cane. A young mom down the block, still in her robe, peeked out with a cup of tea. Everyone's eyes went from Karen's damaged SUV to the perfectly unscathed trash can. Karen, realizing she had an audience, immediately shifted tactics. She threw her hands in the air and started yelling. "Who put this here? This is illegal. This trash can is a menace. It's a safety hazard," she screeched, pointing at the can like it had personally insulted her. The neighbors didn't say much, but I could see the smirks on their faces. They'd all dealt with Karen's antics in one form or another. And now she was finally the one getting embarrassed. I cracked my front door open just enough to stick my head out, putting on my best look of innocent concern. "Oh no," I called out. "Did you hit my trash can again?" Her head whipped toward me, her face redder than a stop sign. "Your trash can is booby-trapped. You can't do this," she shouted. I walked down the driveway slowly, deliberately, as if I had no idea what she was talking about. I gave the can a light tap with my foot. "Looks normal to me," I said, shrugging. "Same city-issued can I've always had." You did something to it," she stammered, jabbing a finger in my direction. It's too heavy. That's not normal." By now, the garbage truck was rumbling down the street. The driver slowed when he saw the scene unfolding. He leaned out of the cab, looking confused. "Everything all right here?" he called. Karen spun on him like a viper. "This trash can is a hazard. It's damaged my vehicle. He's breaking HOA rules." The driver frowned, glanced at the can, and then back at her car. That looks like the standard model to me," he said flatly. "We pick up hundreds of them every week." I nearly choked trying not to laugh again. Karen was sputtering now, completely losing control of her narrative. She gestured wildly at the trash can, then at her SUV, then at me. This is sabotage. But no one was buying it. Not the driver. Not the neighbors. Not even old Mr. Jenkins, who muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Looks like the only thing sabotaged was your driving, Karen." That line sent a ripple of chuckles through the block. I just smiled, patted the can affectionately, and said, "Well, I guess it's true what they say. One man's trash is another woman's problem." Karen stormed back into her car, slamming the door so hard it rattled. She peeled out down the street, her bumper hanging slightly askew, leaving behind a trail of humiliation in her wake. The neighbors lingered a little longer, sharing knowing looks, a few laughs, and subtle nods in my direction. Nobody said it out loud, but I could tell they were all thinking the same thing. Karen finally got what she deserved. As for me, I wheeled my concrete champion back up the driveway with a grin that lasted the rest of the day. But little did I know, the battle wasn't over yet. Because Karen wasn't the type to lick her wounds quietly. No, she was already plotting her next move. And I was more than ready for round two. For the rest of that day, I felt like a king. My indestructible trash can stood tall like a knight in shining armor, and I couldn't help grinning every time I glanced out the window. But deep down, I knew Karen wouldn't let it end there. People like her never admit defeat. They don't reflect, they don't apologize, they plot. Sure enough, by the following evening, I noticed her silver SUV wasn't parked in her driveway. I figured she'd taken it to a body shop for repairs. No surprise there. But what did surprise me was the glares I started getting from her. Every time she passed my house on foot, walking her dog, or snooping around like she always did, she'd shoot me a look that could melt steel. She was planning something. I could feel it. And I was right. That weekend, late at night, I was in the living room watching TV when I heard a strange scraping noise outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind rattling the gutters. But then I heard it again, metal dragging on pavement. I killed the TV, crept to the front window, and peeked through the blinds. There she was. Karen. In the middle of the night, dressed in dark sweatpants and a hoodie, struggling to wrestle my concrete trash can across the curb. For a second, I just stood there in shock. Then, the absurdity of it hit me, and I nearly laughed out loud. The woman who had spent weeks destroying my trash can was now trying to steal it. Or at least move it. Like some deranged raccoon raiding a garbage buffet. But the joke was on her. That thing weighed hundreds of pounds. Watching her huff and puff, pulling with all her weight, was like watching a toddler try to drag a refrigerator. She managed to tilt it slightly, groaning under the effort, but it barely shifted an inch. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera, and started recording. If Karen wanted to wage war, fine, but this time, I was going to have evidence. After about 5 minutes of comical struggling, she gave up. Sweaty, red-faced, and muttering curses, she kicked the can one last time and stormed off into the night. I leaned back, chuckling. Nice try, Karen. The next morning, the drama kicked up another notch. I opened my front door to grab the newspaper. Yes, I still get the paper. Don't judge me, and there it was. A bright yellow HOA violation notice taped to my door. An authorized modification of city property trash bin non-compliant. At the bottom, in bold red letters, it read, fine, $250. Must replace immediately. I almost spit out my coffee. An authorized modification. Non-compliant. I hadn't even admitted to doing anything to the trash can. This was Karen's handiwork, plain and simple. She was using her HOA position to try and force me to get rid of it. But what she didn't realize was that I'd already prepared for this. Remember that video I took of her trying to drag the trash can away in the middle of the night? Yeah, I sent it to the entire HOA board with a polite little note attached. I'd like to dispute this fine. As you can see, my trash can is perfectly compliant. However, one of your board members seems to have a personal vendetta against it. Please advise. I hit send with a smile. 2 days later, the board called an emergency meeting. I showed up, video in hand, ready for battle. Karen was already there, arms crossed, glaring daggers at me. She looked confident, smug, even. The HOA president cleared his throat. We're here to address a complaint regarding a trash can. Karen immediately jumped in, her voice shrill. It's not just a trash can. It's a weapon. He's filled it with something, cement, bricks, I don't know what, but it's dangerous. It damaged my vehicle. The other board members exchanged uneasy glances. That's when I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The room filled with the sound of scraping pavement as Karen appeared on the screen, dragging, pulling, and ultimately failing to move the can. Her hoodie had slipped off halfway through, making it clear as day that it was her. Then came the moment she kicked the can and stormed away in defeat. I didn't say a word. I just let the video play. By the time it ended, the room was dead silent. One board member coughed. Karen, would you care to explain this? Karen's face turned crimson. That's not what it looks like. I was inspecting it. Inspecting it? At midnight, another board member said, raising an eyebrow. The president sighed, rubbing his temples. Karen, this is getting out of hand. We're not issuing any fines. And frankly, if this continues, we may need to reevaluate your position on the board. Her jaw dropped. What? You can't. But she could see it in their faces. For once, the rest of the board wasn't backing her up. I leaned back in my chair, fighting the urge to grin like an idiot. Victory, sweet and solid as concrete. After that meeting, Karen kept her distance. Oh, she still glared at me whenever our paths crossed, and I'd catch her muttering under her breath sometimes. But she never touched my trash can again. The concrete can remained proudly by the curb every Thursday, week after week, unbothered and immovable. A silent monument to the day Karen finally met her match. And as for the neighbors, let's just say I suddenly became a bit of a local legend. People would smile and wave, some even giving me a thumbs up when they passed my driveway. Because everyone knew, for once, the HOA Karen didn't win. Looking back, I can honestly say that was the best home improvement project I ever tackled. Forget new siding, forget landscaping, forget all the fancy upgrades people brag about. The greatest thing I ever built was a concrete trash can that taught Karen a lesson she'll never forget. And every time I wheel it to the curb, I smile. Because it doesn't just hold garbage, it holds victory.